show you how to work with the data palette. In this section, we're going to see another way to work with data. We're going to create the departments page over here. And we're going to see how you can work with the data palette over here. Over here, you again can see all our business object, and you can now drag and drop business object into the page. For example, we're going to drag department over here and create a table of data to show you the department ID and the department's name, as well as the maximum salary. This is one area of our page. We can also drag and drop the department over here below or to the side to create an edit form. Again, we'll choose the fields that we want to allow to edit, like the department and the max salary in our case. The department ID is the selected department, so let's create a page variable. We'll call this one selected department, and we're going to map this to both the get department and update department parameter, which is a mandatory parameter as the star here indicates. Right, so we created a form here, but the form is actually surrounded by a bind if that checks if we actually select a department before it actually shows this. So now let's enable selection on the table. So we pick up the table, enable selection, and we're going to define an event on the table for when we select a row. What we're going to do here is assign a variable. We're going to assign a variable into our selected department, and the value that we're going to assign is the row key of the row that we selected. If we go back into the user interface, you can now see that clicking on a department would bring up the information about this department on the right side, and we can update this to save the data. Now, once we save, we need to refresh the table to show the updated data. To do that, we can take the table, assign an ID for it, and then take the save button and go and look at the logic of what happens when we click this. So again, this is logic that Visual Builder created for us. At the end of this logic, we click. And then, so again, this is logic that which is called table 1, and we want to refresh it. So now, if we go back to our page, switch to live mode, we update the salary here, click save, and the table refreshes to show us the new data. So this is again an example of working with the data palette over here and creating pages based on that.
Sorry, we're only considering candidates with Python using AI skills. Do you have any experience?
No, not yet.
This section of Getting Started with Oracle Visual Builder, I'm going to show you how to integrate data from external REST services into your application. Up until now, we worked with business object as the source of data. But Visual Builder also allows you to access external REST services. Let's create a connection to a service. We can define services by picking them up from catalogs, using their Swagger or OpenAPI spec, or like we'll do here, using their endpoint. We paste the URL to the REST service over here, and we also indicate what type of information we're getting back. In this case, we're getting a list of all the countries, so we're getting many records back. The operation is get, and we can then create a backend. We'll call this our countries backend. We can specify what type of authentication this REST service requires. In our case, we don't. In this case, we're getting a list of all the countries, so we're getting many records back. The operation is get, and we can then create a backend. We'll call this our countries backend. We can specify what type of authentication this REST service requires. In our case, we don't require authentication, and whether this service supports CORS or not over here. In the next step, we're going to define CORS or not over here. In the next step, we're going to define the service name. So we're going to call this the get countries. We can add a description and any parameters we need in the request. Then we can test our REST service over here. We can see the response and save it as an example response. This then populates the response area, which defines the structure of data that will be returned. Let's create this endpoint. Right, if we now go back to our application, and we'll take the other part of our application, and over here we want to use services. In the data palette, we now have access to the service we defined, get countries, with the endpoint to get many countries. Drag and drop it into the page, we can, for example, create a list, choose a layout for the list, and populate the specific fields we're interested in, the specific slots. So let's indicate, for example, the flag as the leading slot, and we'll switch this one to be an image. In the default slot, we'll have name. We can add aspects like the capital as the secondary slots and the native name over here. In the metadata slot, maybe we want to indicate the population. Primary key is going to be our Alpha2 code. Next and finish, we'll now create a page where data is fetched from our REST service. In addition to creating pages that are just on REST services, you can over here. In the metadata slot, maybe we want to indicate the population. Primary key is going to be our Alpha2 code. Next, primary key is pages that are just on REST services. You can mix and match business objects and REST services. Let's go back to our edit employee page over here. Over here we have a country field that is a 2-letter code. Maybe we want to add the ability to edit and select a country from a list. To do that, we're going to use a component called a selection component. We're going to use a select single. We're going to add it to our form, and then we can just move it around, select from a list. Over here, we edit that are just on REST services. You can mix and match business objects and REST services. Let's go back to our edit employee page over here. Over here, we have a country field that is a 2-letter code. Maybe we want to add the ability to edit and select a country from a list. To do that, we're going to use a component called a selection component. We're going to use a select single. We're going to add it to our form, and then we can just move it around to be the second field over here. And we're going to add option to this field. This time, using a quick start to add option, we also have access to our get countries service, and we're going to show the name and return the Alpha2 code. In the general properties for this field, we can update it to say the label is country, and the data for this is the value is going to be saved into the employee's own country field over here. This now creates basically a mapping between those two fields over here, country and country here. Now if we actually run the page, we can pick up another country and see the code being changed over on the left side, or we can choose the other way around, update the country here and see the list updated on the right side. So this is how we integrate another service into the same user interface.
Office politics can ruin your career and block the opportunities you deserve if you don't know how to handle it.
In this section of the Getting Started with Oracle Visual Builder, we're going to talk about publishing the application and how to manage the lifecycle of your application through iterative development. While you're developing the application, you can work with the live mode to see how the application works, but you can also click the little preview button up here that would run your application in a separate browser window. In the section of the Getting Started with Oracle Visual Builder, we're going to talk about publishing the application and how to manage the lifecycle of your application through iterative development. While you're developing the application, you can work with the live mode to see how the application works, but you can also click the little preview button up here that would run your application in a separate browser window. You can see your application in action, click on an employee, go and change the information about this employee, for example, associate them with a different department, okay, indicate that they are a manager, and even switch the country that they are based out of. Save the data to save it back into the database. You can also see the navigation to the other parts of our application over here, for example, to the departments page. Once you're done developing your application and you're ready for other people to test it, go over to the top menu and select the stage option. You can stage with a clean database, or you can populate the testing environment with your development data, which is what I'm going to do here. Once you're done developing your application and you're ready for other people to test it, go over to the top menu and select the stage option. You can stage with a clean database, or you can populate the testing environment with your development data, which is what I'm going to do here. Once your application is staged, you can open the stage application from the menu here. Notice that the URL for this application has the version number for your application over here, and you can now pass this over to other people in your organization to test your application. Once you're happy with your application, you're ready for the next stage, which is publishing the application. Again, you can populate data from the stage environment or create an empty database. We're going to populate from the stage, click publish, and your application has been published. If you now go back to your Visual Builder homepage, you would see the indication that your application is now live. You can click on it, click on the URL, and you'll be taken into the live version of your application. If you now need to do a new version of your application, you can go to the menu over here and choose to create a new version. Give it a new version number, you can add a description if you want to, and create a new version. This allows you to have a live application in parallel to an application that you're working on in development. So let's go, for example, into our application in development and modify, for example, our start page. For example, we can make the picture a little bigger, like that. Now that we're happy with our changes, we can go back to that cycle of staging the application. And then we can republish the application. When we publish, it's important to notice whether you want to keep the existing data that is already in the live application, which very likely you want to do, or if you want to copy data from stage or clean the database. I'm going to keep the data in the existing live database because we don't want to override changes people did. Once we publish the new application, people who were using the live application, if they would now do a refresh of the application, would get the new version showing up in the same URL that they were on before. So now the images are much bigger. So this is the basics of managing the lifecycle of your application. For a more advanced way of managing your application lifecycle, have a look into Visual Builder Studio. Welcome to this demonstration of progressive web applications for mobile devices with Oracle Visual Builder. My name is Shai Schmelzer. In this demonstration, we're going to show you how to create progressive web application or PWA. PWAs for mobile devices in Visual Builder, how to basically enable PWA on an existing application, how to prompt the user to install the application on the device, how to add device integration such as integration with the GPS, camera, and files on the device to your application, and how updates to your application are automatically propagated to the mobile device without any action needed from your side. We're starting with a web application or a web page that we created in Visual Builder. In the application setting, there's a section for progressive web apps. We can simply enable progressive web app on our application. This would give us an interface to define the application name, coloring, splash images, for example, that are going to be used, and even the offline page that would show up when we're offline. Once we added this functionality that are going to be used, and even the offline page that would show up when we're offline. Once we added this functionality to our application, and even the offline page that would show up to define the application name, coloring, splash images, for example, that are going to
let's go through this app or article. There is an app for everything, from banking to studying and from trading to shopping. Every business has an app, and even our government have simplified their services into app form. Holding on, building and maintaining an app is cumbersome and it's quite expensive for small businesses. So how do they manage? Well, it's simple. With the help of advancements in technology, there is an option that helps small businesses out. This option combines the feature of an app with the technology used in web development to build affordable services for businesses. I'm talking about progressive web apps. Let's dive in and get a better understanding of what PWAs are all about. What is a progressive web app? Progressive web applications, PWAs, are apps built with web technologies that we probably all know and love, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But they have the feel and functionality of an actual native app. Wait a minute. Native apps? What do we mean by this? A native app is a software application built in a specific programming language for a specific device platform, either iOS or Android. PWAs are built with the capabilities like push notifications and the ability to work offline. They are also built on and enhanced with modern APIs, which make it easy to deliver improved capabilities along with reliability and the ability to install them on any device. PWAs takes advantage of the huge web ecosystem. This is inclusive of the plugins and community and the relative ease of deploying and keeping a website, contrary to a native application, which is pretty difficult to develop. This means you can build a PWA quickly and easily. With its popularity, many companies have shifted into the product. I tend to believe that this is because of its ability to run on an Android and iOS without much difference. Some good examples of top companies who have their products as PWAs include Twitter, Pinterest, Uber, TikTok, Spotify, Jumia, a leading e-commerce site in Africa, etc. A common feature about this product is that they are all installable on your home screen, able to work offline from where you left, and offer a comparable experience and features to their native apps. Just like when building a native mobile app, there are some expectations that should be met to make a good product for consumer use. The same thing applies to PWAs. Let's discuss what makes a good PWA. Characteristics of PWAs. Below is what should be considered when developing a PWA. Responsiveness. Different companies produce